All right, I don't see any. No, so Anthony's saying, do we have a binary for all the packages? No, you can't just you can't just append this to all the packages, to any package. Okay, all right, guys, so I'm gonna show you something right now that we're gonna use. Let me go here. So if you go to the configuration, we have this thing called environment variables. And essentially you can add, you can think of them as variables that you can add to your kind of Python interpreter. And you can use those variables in your code. So here, I can add, say, for example, name. Usually it's like this, all uppercase, and then you can give it something like Ben. So you can save this one. Now notice a few things. If I go here and if I change something, say for example, name is just like that. And if I save it and if I build and deploy, right now it's actually built, it's deploying, building and deploying. Let me see. Okay, right now it's uploading. Once it's done, you will notice that this does not get overwritten. So when you deploy your SAM application from your machine, it doesn't kind of start a new application. So some of the things that you specify will actually persist. Another thing that persists is the timeout. So if you remember, actually the timeout, yeah, the timeout, we change the timeout for the other function, not this one. So the timeout also persists. So let's see, is it finished? Yeah, that's finished. So even if I refresh and go to environment variables, you see that this stays. So when you build and deploy, it doesn't get rid of the environment variables that you create using the web interface, this kind of web interface. Now you could actually define your environment variables here, somewhere here in the code, but we just don't want to do that now. Okay, so now you can actually get the value by accessing the key. So here, if I go here, if I can say the name is, and I can do comma, you can do that, by the way, in Python, or just to kind of make it simpler for you, I'm going to just concatenate. We know we're more comfortable with concatenation. I'm going to say os.environ, essentially. And here you specify the key, which happens to be name. So you can do this, and that's going to get the value for this key from the environment variables. So I'm going to right now build and deploy. All right, so if I refresh the page, again, you see my environment variables are still there. And if I test the code, it should print name is Ben. Let's see. You can see it printed name is Ben. Do you guys see what happened here? So in my code, I didn't specify Ben. I actually referenced one of the environment variables. And this is very useful if you want to put passwords. It's actually a very bad idea to put passwords in your code, because you're going to share your code probably with your friends or with your boss or whomever, and you don't want to put the passwords kind of like this in kind of pure text. So what you would do is you would save the password in an environment variable, and then you can do this. Okay, guys, do you have any questions about any of this? All right, you don't have any questions, so I think right now we can talk about accessing the database. So here's the code for that. I'm going to say connection equals to psycopg2 dot connect. That's the syntax. And here I'm going to say the user is equal to os dot environment variable user. I'm going to have to actually add kind of the value of the user. And then I'm going to add the value for the password. I just don't want to show you that, of course. os.environment kind of pass. And then I'm going to have one for host. And I'm going to have one for port. Actually, port is easy. That's going to be kind of 5432. And of course, we need one for the database. Let me do that. Database. So this is essentially the database name. I can give it name. So if you give it this information, the user, the password, the host, the database name, and the port, which will be the same for all of us, you can make a connection to the database. So I'm going to say cursor. I'm going to do something actually very simple. Let's look at our database here. Let me go to one of them. Let's say book. So we have a book here. And book has book title, ISBN, number of pages. So we can try to insert into book. So I'm going to create a cursor. We can talk about that in a little bit. For now, you can just think of it as syntax that you need to write. And then I'm going to do the insert query. I can create the text, and that's going to be maybe insert into book. And it has ID, book title, book ISBN. So I can do ID, title, book ISBN. And there's another one, right? Number of pages, book num of pages. Well, I don't need to do that. I don't even need book ISBN. Let's just do ID and title. Actually, let's just do, well, let's do ID title. And I'm going to say values. And maybe it's going to be like for the ID, let's do 10. For the book title, let's say talking to strangers. Okay, guys, so that's really the query. And then I'm going to do cursor.execute. That's the syntax. Insert query, and then connection.commit. Something like that. So again, this one is going to create a connection to the database. This is the query. It's very simple. I mean, you need to kind of memorize a few things, but for the most part, it's basic enough. And this one's going to execute the query, and you're going to save the execution. So you want to commit your query. So let's do that. Let's see if that will work. Let's make sure that we don't have 10 as the ID. Okay, we don't have 10. Now, of course, I need to go here also, and I need to add the environment variables for all of that, for my user, password, host, and the name, so that when this executes, we have the right values. So I'm going to pause the share now, and I'm going to add the values for the user, password, host, name, and then I'll deploy after that. And you can ask me questions while I do that. I don't mind. I think I should be able to answer them. All right, I'm adding the name of the database. I'm gonna add the user. I'm gonna add the password.
Professor?
Uh-huh.
So I haven't seen you write the SQL syntax like outside of the console before. Is that
Yeah,
why
yeah.
are you able to do that?
So let me do that and let me share my screen in a second. Okay, let me do this. Let me do that and make sure that I have the right things open. Okay, right now you should see my mouse, right? So typically the way we've been writing SQL is in the console. So we actually go to the console and we write kind of SQL, all of that is SQL, whether it's a select or insert or create, all of that is SQL. And this is how we've been actually writing a SQL. But if you want to use a language like Python or Java to connect to a database and write SQL, it has to be done like this. So essentially you would create the connection to the database through a package, and then you would, define your SQL statement and you would kind of execute it. And what this will do, essentially, it'll almost as if you're executing this in the console. So that's how it works. And this is very, very common to do because, again, so database by itself is not that useful. Database is always connected to kind of another language like Java or PHP or C or Python. So even though we're writing SQL here, we're actually doing it through Python, and we're not using an object relational mapper. So if you want to kind of interact with the database from a language like Java or Python, you can do it by just writing pure SQL and using a package, or you can use object relational mapper, which is also actually pretty common. So this is new. We haven't done this before. This is new. But it should make sense, hopefully. Again, it's almost as if you're writing your SQL in the console.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
What is the I see connection.cursor, because I can gather that connect is within PSY package, but where does the connection come from? Oh no, never mind. I see. It's the variable. Okay.
Yeah, it's all coming from the package. So okay. All right, guys. So let's test it. I'm kind of looking forward to testing it and see if it'll work. Now, if right now we want to build and deploy, and if we build and deploy, and if it works, every time we test it, it's going to actually, put something in the database. Now we have a problem here because it's not going to put 10 multiple times. So let's replace this with, let's import random. And let's say random dot rand int. Let's say from random import rand int. And let's actually do a formatted string here. And let's replace that with random or rand int between 0 and 5,000. Okay, guys. So what I'm doing here, I think I did that before with you, because I have kind of a variable here. I can use a formatted string. So I would do f here, and between square brackets, I would specify my kind of the value, which will be again generated from this function. So essentially, I can print, if you guys want, I can print insert query. I can just to kind of make sure that we know which query it is. And I can say print the query was like this, so that we know. Okay, I'm going to build and deploy, and then I'm going to test it. And let's see, hopefully it'll work. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to say, let me clear. I'm going to say Sam build and Sam deploy. All right, let me go back to the function. It's still deploying probably. So I have, let me open a few things here. Let me open, first of all, let me get rid of this. Let me go here. Actually, let me go here and let me open the book. Okay, so this is what we have so far. Did it finish? So right now it finished deploying. Let me go here. Let me kind of remove this one. Let me go here. And right now I can test it. And it didn't like it. Let's see. Okay, so it says pass was not actually in my environment variables. I think I used password instead of pass. So let me pause the share and change the key to pass instead of password. Yeah, I can see that there's a password. Let me change it to pass. Let me save it. I don't need to I don't need to build and deploy. I can just, okay. So here I'm resuming the share. I'm going to test again. So I changed, here again, it says pass doesn't exist. So I'm going to change, right now I'm going to try to test again. I changed password to pass. So let me test. Okay, it doesn't like it. It says, but that's kind of interesting. Let's see what it says. It says the column title does not exist. So here I made a mistake and none of you corrected me. There's no title, there's book title. So I thought it's title. It's book title. Nobody kind of found that mistake. So this one has to be book title, guys. So I'm going to save and I'm going to, again, build and deploy. So right now it's building and deploying. All right, it's going to finish in a few seconds. I can test it when it's done. Okay, so it's finished. Let me go here, let me refresh, and let me test it again. I think this time it will work. Let's see. Okay, so you can see it succeeded. It added, and you can see the query. The query was this. And now if you go to the table here, if you refresh it, you see that we have talking to strangers with this ID. So if I go here, now again, the idea of the code is not to just access the database. The idea is to get some data, either by scraping. I mean, that's one scenario of accessing the database using Lambda. The scenario is I'm gonna get some data, either by scraping or accessing API, just like what we did for the weather. I'm gonna do some processing and I'm gonna put the data in the database, and I'm gonna do that periodically. So I'm going to do it every minute, maybe, or every hour, or every day. So here I can add a new trigger. And I'm going to say event bridge. And I'm going to say create a new rule. And I'm going to say minute, 1 minute, let's say minute rule. And I'm going to say schedule expression. And I'm going to say rate 1 minute. So I'm going to do this, and I'm going to say add, and that's it. And right now, there is this trigger that happens every minute. So if I go to my table here, I'm going to just keep refreshing, and you will see that every single minute, it's going to add the same row, which again is kind of silly. But if you're doing something more useful, like again, scraping data or accessing APIs, it would be much more useful. Lua, you have a question? Okay. All right, so I'm gonna just wait a few seconds and refresh, and you will see that every single minute it's gonna add a new row. Do you guys have any questions about this? You can see it added this one. And if after 1 minute, another minute, it'll add another one. So when you do this, you want to make sure, of course, that you at some point delete, unless you really want to scrape something or access something every minute. But you don't want to forget it, because your database is going to be full pretty kind of quickly if every minute is adding something. Okay, so right now we still have to, after a few seconds, we're going to have a third one. You see, I have a third one. And if we wait another minute, it'll add another one. Do you guys have any questions about any of this? So today I showed you how you can use SAM and AWS command line interface to deploy Lambda functions. Of course, we talked about this. You can have any SQL that you want, not only insert, you can select, you can update, you can even create. You can do any query that you want here. And if you do this, all of that, it'll actually execute that query. We talked about kind of environment variables. We talked about requirements, a lot of things. Now I'm going to go here and I'm going to actually click here and I'm going to delete this trigger because I don't want it to keep adding every minute. So I'm going to delete that trigger. There's this other trigger which you can ignore for now. This comes with a template actually. We can delete it. We don't need it. Maybe one day we'll talk about this one, but I think it's unlikely for this course. Do you guys have other questions? Do you have any questions about anything we did? So do we have only 3 or okay, 4 and that's it? We're not going to have any more because I stopped the trigger. I deleted it. So that's it. Of course, every time I run the code, it'll add one. So what do you guys think? Do you guys know what Twilio is? Anybody worked with Twilio in the past? Yeah, nobody. So maybe we'll talk about it one day. It's not, I mean, we can use it in databases, but it's actually pretty useful to have when you write code. It sends you text messages, so you can, for example, if you wanna get a text message whenever something happens, you can use Twilio, and it'll charge you for each message it sends, but it's very cheap.